The optimism behind democracy. Democracy as a system is not flawed. The ideals of democracy are still very relevant in today's world. What is flawed is the way that people think of democracy. Those who have it have lost faith in it, but more importantly, those that don't have it idealize it without realizing that it is more than just free elections. I take it as a rule of thumb to define the essential terms of a topic before I speak about it in public. As such, I suppose that I could stand here and give you a definition of democracy, one that was hopefully contemplated over by multiple scholars. However, after my first couple weeks in global democracy, it became very clear to me that defining the term democracy will not capture the essence of democracy from one country to another, because as a concept, it varies greatly to every country. As a quick example of this idea, consider what it means to Indians after Gandhi and to Czechoslovakians after Havel and the totalitarian regime. The basic principles overlap, having the choice to choose your government and having basic human rights. However, the ideals between these two political philosophers differs greatly because of the context that they were in during their struggle for democracy. The definition of democracy aside, if we're to consider the development of democracy in the past century, an essay titled "What's Gone Wrong with Democracy" argues that democracy's global advance has come to a halt and may have even gone into reverse. It argues that developing countries are trying to instill democracy into their countries and are failing to do so because of the blind optimism that they put into democracy. And that they have no well-functioning role model for democracy because of the Western countries' dysfunction and depth, and thus their strife to democracy usually ends in collapse. Thus, optimism-driven democracy, such as that of the revolutions of the Arab Spring, leave the country either in its previous state or even in a worse state. Diaries of an Unfinished Revolution talks about the development of the Arab Spring in different countries and gives us an insider's perspective about the way that people perceived democracy during the uprisings in the country. Yasmin El-Rashidi of Egypt speaks about the uprisings against the regime as all the people standing together in solidarity with one another. For years until the Arab Spring, the Egyptian people allowed themselves to be suppressed and censored. But when they stood together in Tahrir Square, it was as if every Egyptian had an important place in society, where their presence was important and helped to make a difference. Egypt was essentially a place of utopia. Gandhi is one of the most influential political speakers, and his principles on nonviolence, brotherhood, and equality amongst all people is reflected in the uprisings throughout the world. In a sense, the people of Egypt were building on what Gandhi essentially believed. During the uprisings, all people, men and women, Christian and Muslims, stood together. The revolutions reflected what Gandhi said in one of his speeches is most necessary for democracy: power in the people. Why then would I say that this kind of democracy is faulty in itself? According to Yasmin, the people of Egypt were primarily concerned with the fall of the regime, followed by free elections. When we look at the Economist's essay, however, it says that recent democratic experiments often fail because they put too much emphasis on free elections and too little emphasis on other aspects of democracy, such as individual rights and freedom and the power held by the state. Gandhi largely focused on social aspects of democracy, such as equality amongst all the people, whereas Egypt, after the revolution, considered themselves to be heading towards a democratic state because Morsi was elected to power. When Morsi filled the upper house with supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, however, it seemed to me as if the equality amongst all people and in the society that the Egyptian revolution was bringing on was essentially countered. Another recent democratic experiment is that issue of South Africa and Mandela's fight to freedom for the country. Mandela sought equal rights for the blacks and whites in his country, and when he managed to rid South Africa of apartheid, his presidency aimed to instill a multicultural democratic governmental system. For Mandela, democracy was the forgiveness of past injustices and the implementation of a government centered on direct participation by all. This idea of direct participation, which we reflected on before with Gandhi and post-Mandela with the Arab Spring. This optimistic view of democracy is the one that Mandela instilled in South Africa. So then, democracy was successfully established, right? Actually, not. The Economist article talks about needing to keep the power of the state in check in order to combat corruption so that democracy can function in these countries. Since the introduction of democracy in 1994, South Africa has been ruled by the same party, the African National Congress, which has become progressively more self-serving. The country still faces crime and poverty, and the goals of establishing economic justice between the blacks and the whites is still not being established. Mandela's goal for South Africa is still just a goal. The Economist essay says that one of the biggest problems with democracy in today's day is that people have lost faith in it. By not actively participating in the state's affairs, people, by, for example, forsaking voting rights, people are siding with the powerful side of the country. Take a look at our college itself. Only 54% of the campus voted in recent SGA elections. The rest of the 46% sided with the already powerful or most popular candidate. Citizens' faith in democracy has been lifted, but I argue that there is nothing essentially wrong with democracy, only the way that people look at democracy these days. Democracy is not a perfect system of equality. What it is giving rights to people to help make decisions about their country in a way that fits the rule of law of their country. At the end of the day, it is up to the people to appropriately exercise their rights that democracy aims to give them. Thank you.